Ladies and gentlemen, please turn your attention to the stage as we begin our session.
We all make decisions every day that affect our health and well-being, especially when it comes to food. The time has come for us to start thinking about what we eat in a new way. Science is giving us the hard evidence that what we eat can indeed help us live longer, healthier lives. But when it comes to food and our health, it's not just about the food. It's about how our body responds to what we put in it. Good health is not just the absence of disease. It's an active state maintained by our body's natural health defense systems. Systems that are hard at work from the day we're born until our very last breath. The foods that we choose to eat every day can either activate our defenses or damage them. What are the health defense systems? They are angiogenesis, our blood vessels that bring oxygen and nutrients to every cell in our body. Our stem cells that repair and regenerate our organs even as we age. Our microbiome, the healthy bacteria in our gut. Our DNA that can protect and repair itself when it's damaged. And our immune system, which is more powerful than we ever imagined. When these defenses fail, our health fails. And when we support them with foods that boost our defenses, our bodies become stronger, healthier, and more able to resist and fight the diseases that we fear the most. More than 200 foods have been discovered to improve our circulation, activate our stem cells, feed our microbiome, protect our DNA, and bolster our immunity. And what this means is that we can eat to defend ourselves against conditions like diabetes, heart disease, obesity, autoimmune conditions, dementia, and even cancer. What's important is that we can now focus our attention on what to add to our diet and not just what to cut out. As a physician and a scientist, I've seen the power of medicine in treating disease. But foods are even more powerful because they can prevent disease in the first place. So when it comes to food and our health, there are no paradoxes. It's clear. Science tells us which foods boost our health defenses. Food as medicine is not just an idea whose time has come. It's an idea that's absolutely essential to our health for each and every one of us. So whether you're trying to stay well or need to take back your health, whether you're fighting a chronic disease or trying to prevent one in the first place, the great news is that we can all eat to beat disease.
Good morning. Thank you for joining us for this food as medicine discussion. Food as medicine is a hot topic these days, and it's a really important topic. We know that food and diet-related disease is now a leading cause of death in many places around the globe, outpacing tobacco in many countries, including here in the United States. Obesity rates are skyrocketing. We're now predicted to have at least half of our adult population with obesity by the year 2050. That means skyrocketing rates of obesity-related chronic diseases. And more than that, we now have a body of emerging science showing us that we need to look at food not just for its ability to prevent us from getting sick, but also for the power it might hold to treat illness when we are sick. Mm-hmm. So we have an all-star panel. I mean that actually today, truly. We've got some rock stars on the panel. I will start here on my left. Representative Tim Ryan.
Rock star.
Rock star. Representing Ohio's 13th District in our United States Congress, serving since 2003. And also, you may not know, he is the author of the book, The Real Food Revolution, Healthy Eating, Green Groceries, and the Return of the American Family Farm. Other rock star, Dr. William Lee, a physician, a scientist, a leader of the Angiogenesis Foundation, and also author of Eat to Beat Disease, which you just released and has now achieved New York Times bestseller status. Congratulations. And I guess you're a rock star. The one and only Edge, member of the rock band U2. He's won 22 Grammy Awards, has campaigned for human rights and philanthropic causes around the world, and also serves on the board of the Angiogenesis Foundation.
Yeah.
So Edge, I'm going to start with you. I'm going to ask the big question. Many people may be wondering, what the hell are you doing here talking about food?
Well, I have to admit there's inside this rock star outer is a science geek, and I'm fascinated with science. But what led me to get involved in this particular area of science was a family crisis, as often happens. My 7-year-old developed leukemia, and my response to that was to do a deep dive into the science, the medical science, everything related to her illness. And that led me to William Lee and the Angiogenesis Foundation. And when I discovered this new area of scientific research called angiogenesis, I was equally intrigued and fascinated, but also I was surprised that I hadn't heard about it. And when I started to really figure it out, I realized that there's an awful lot that we still don't know. Information that's out there that has not really filtered through to the point where we can benefit from it. So I decided to join the board to help spread the news of angiogenesis and what it can mean to personal health and public health.
And your daughter is?
My daughter is now 21, and she's beautiful and totally healthy. So.
This big word we're using, angiogenesis, Dr. Lee, can you help explain to those of us who aren't doctors what that means?
Right. Well, angiogenesis is how our body grows blood vessels. We've got 60,000 miles worth of blood vessels in every single one of us, and it brings oxygen and nutrients to every single cell. So it's, in fact, something that when we feed ourselves, our blood vessels bring those nutrients to everywhere else in our body. When those blood vessels are perfectly in balance, where our health is in balance, when they're deficient, our organs starve, and we need to feed them more. And if they're hijacked, if the blood vessels are hijacked by diseases like cancer, it can actually feed the cancer to feed the disease. So this is one of a number of different health defense systems that we've actually discovered not only can biotechnology deliver breakthrough treatments, but we actually now believe, after 25 years of working in this field, that our food is an important activator of our defenses like angiogenesis as well.
And you, I know in your 25 years, you've studied a lot of diseases and a lot of different strategies for beating those diseases. What is it that has made you focus on food?
Well, so one of the privileges that we've had as a nonprofit organization is to serve as a nexus with industry, government, and academia. And we looked at common denominators of disease as a way of having economies of scale. So rather than just focus on one disease and one target and dive really deeply, we were very interested in seeing how blood vessels, as an example, could cut across multiple diseases. And if you could actually, hit one successfully, could you pull the bow back and send an arrow through many different diseases? And that's what led us to help develop treatments for cancer, complications of diabetes, and also vision loss. As our successes started to keep pouring out, one of the things that we realized is that, as we know in our healthcare system, we only have so much resource to be able to dedicate to sick people, and new medicines are indeed expensive. And so I switched our thinking into what if we were to prevent disease so that we could have enough more resources in the pot for the people that couldn't avoid it. And if you're going to talk about prevention, you can't talk about drugs. You have to talk about health, and you have to talk about an intervention like food. And that's what led me to use really the same serious science that we have used for drug development to really begin looking at food as medicine.
So it sounds like, this is, again, not a doctor, so bear with me, but it sounds like what you're saying is we have researchers and doctors that sit in different tranches, studying heart disease, diseases of the eye, but what you have done is lift up and try to find the commonality, and that's what you're going for.
We are very interested in common denominators, and I think food is a uniter and a common denominator for all of us and all of our health, which is why
Right.
this topic is so important.
And Edge, what's the hope with the Angiogenesis Foundation? Are you seeking to raise money for research? Are you lobbying for new policies? Are you trying to activate a grassroots of consumers? What's the hope?
There's so many different areas where we think there could be benefit and improvement. Communication. We've been to Washington a few times, and Tim is doing great work with his book and his platform that he's developing to make food an important political issue. But we wanted to try and foster more communication between the different government agencies, because there's so much low-hanging fruit there in terms of knowledge and information that has not been tapped into fully. We want to encourage more education for people in medical school, because there's scant education for doctors in terms of diet, and virtually like nothing for angiogenesis. But also, there's other things that maybe on down the road. I think we're frustrated a little bit that foods that are known to have medical benefits cannot advertise that on the labels when they're for sale, for good reasons, because the FDA want to prevent exploitation of the public, and it's an understandable resistance to allowing medical claims on food packaging. But I think there's so much evidence now from population studies particularly to show that certain foods really have health benefits, that I think it's time to look at that again and possibly find some accommodation for these foods that have known impact.
And before we turn to Representative Ryan, just to put a finer point on what you just said, we've got a chart, which is how you sort of convinced me to show what you're finding. Will you explain to us what this is?
Right. So this is an actual set of experiments that my organization conducted, and on the vertical axis is really a set of different medicines that have been tested against healthy blood vessels. And in this particular case, the top black line are the number of blood vessels that might be feeding a cancer, for example, and testing normal drugs, whether they're cancer drugs or common drugs like statins or an antibiotic or a non-inflammatory, non-steroidal inflammatory medicine. You can kind of see that even common medicines in our medicine cabinet can actually have cancer-starving effects by cutting off the blood supply feeding tumors. Well, we decided to take an agnostic look. I've labeled the drugs here. What happens if you use the same system to study food? For example, you can order a chemical and send it to a cancer research lab, and within a few days know exactly what the effect is. But if you were to actually take a food and give it to the same researcher, they traditionally, using traditional medical research, wouldn't know how to actually test that. So we hacked into that to say, well, what happens if we treat everything the same? And here is what we actually find. If I could have it back up on the screen a second. This is actually comparing head-to-head foods against the medicines. And this is, again, I could take away the labels for everything, and if you were with a Pfizer, Eli Lilly, Genentech, and you just saw these bar charts, you would find it's remarkable to have these activities. But you can see when you actually examine the foods as medicines, the potential that's actually there. So this is one of the things that we really desperately need to move forward in, is to really peel back the layers of the onion and try to take a look at what the potential benefits actually are. This is an opportunity for agencies to collaborate, academia to collaborate amongst each other, and really to form a new field to study exactly this.
I love that you just took a picture of this. We can send you the slide.
Oh, right. I'm going to send it to the Italian side of my family and say, look at that
Look
garlic.
at it,
It's
look at
way
it.
down there. I thought you guys told me it was like
Well-
way at the top.
Well, this one struck a chord with me. I have loved ones who are on tamoxifen, and so I looked at, she could eat red grapes. I mean, what dosage are we talking about? Like, how many red grapes would you need to eat to have the same effect as tamoxifen?
Well, as Edge actually implied, that there are public health studies that are out there, and as a physician, one of the things that, and I've been quite involved with products that have gone through development and gone through the FDA. So evidence is really the key thing. I mean, in medicine and medical research, if we don't have evidence, we have nothing else. And so in developing the evidence, we take a look at public health studies, we look at clinical trials, we look at, some of them are small, we look at animal studies, we look at what's happening at the cell and the genetic level. With public health studies, one of the unsung opportunities is to be able to take a look at the actual data. And when you see that, for example, soy is correlated not with increasing breast cancer, but decreasing it. And there's a study of 5,000 women who already have breast cancer that show that those who ate more soy actually had lower risk and better mortality outcomes. So you let science kind of surprise us with the facts. And we even know what the molecules might be. There's phytochemicals and there's genistein. We even know the dose from the public health studies, because you can calculate and back calculate what that would be, which is about 10 grams of soy a day.
Which is
Which is about the amount of soy you'd get in a cup of soy milk.
Okay.
So again, we can kind of boil it all down to concrete things that people can use.
Right. All right. Tim, tell us, you wrote a book, The Real Food Revolution. What motivated you to write a food book?
I wrote a book about mindfulness meditation.
Of
and
course.
I was, of course, every congressman does. And I was, as I was doing the research, I was really starting to understand the effects of stress on the body. But it wasn't just stress, it was always stress in diet, stress in food, stress in nutrition, or lack of nutrition. So the second kind of part of the presentation really is food. And my wife has a gluten allergy. Our daughter does. And so I became very sensitive to her and what we were trying to have a baby. And I met Dr. Mark Hyman, and Mark got my wife healthy, primarily addressing the issue around food and supplements and the kind of things that she was missing because our food doesn't have what it used to have. And so I just became very passionate about it. And I sit on the Appropriations Committee in Congress, and that's the committee that spends money. And you start watching really the long-term trajectory of our budget, $1 trillion a year deficits as far as the eye can see. You start understanding how we spend 2.5 times as much on our health care as every other industrialized country and get worse results. And then the real kicker is 75% of our health care cost goes to chronic diseases that are largely preventable. And so to me, it's like, okay, where are we going to get the money to do all the other things we need to do to be a competitive country? And you look at this 75%, $2 to $3 trillion a year as we move out into the future, and then you meet the researchers and the scientists, and to me it was like, okay, we've really got to have a national conversation around food as medicine and really prevention, and how do we realign the healthcare system to pay for your soy milk if we have to, because we're going to save a lot of money in the long run.
Right. I'm glad you raised that. Because there was Milken Institute research published last year about the cost of the obesity crisis and diet-related disease, which, as you just mentioned, are a leading driver of healthcare costs. So just in the year 2016, the indirect costs of obesity in the U.S. were $1.24 trillion. Which added to the direct costs of $481 billion, we had about $1.7 trillion in healthcare costs associated with diet-related disease. What in the world, what more convincing does the Congress need to help invest us in prevention and better diets? Why are we focusing on sick care?
Yeah, I think that's where the argument is right now, and that's where money is. I mean, people are making a lot of money off of a disease care system, and so I'm trying to have a broader conversation. Like, you can't talk about healthcare without talking about health.
Yeah.
And you can't talk about health without talking about food. And you can't talk about food without talking about agriculture. And moving to regenerative agriculture, and actually, I titled my book is The Real Food Revolution.
Yeah.
And I love how all the scientists and doctors come up with like fake food and franken-food and all this stuff that we're eating now, but it's like about real food. And so I think we have to talk to the American people, again, not being a prude around food.
Right.
I mean, I call myself like a 80%er. Like 80% of the time, my family, we try to do it the right way. Then there's a Cleveland Browns football game on, and
Right.
it doesn't happen.
Right.
but that's okay. I think if we all just recognize that if we can get to 80%, we're going to have the money to reinvest back into our communities, reinvest back into prevention, reinvest back into, decarbonizing the economy, helping farmers. I mean, all of these things that are really important can come from the money we would save if we just have leaders in the country saying, okay, this is the way we're going to go. And just quick, lastly, how do we give rebates and refunds to patients? How do we reverse the incentives for doctors where they can actually make a little bit of money keeping us healthy as opposed to only making money when they're dealing with us being sick?
So, what are some of the concrete policy proposals that you think could have traction?
Well, it starts with some simple things. And I have bills on all of these that I'm proposing, is to have a salad bar in every school. Have a school garden in every school. So we begin the long-term educational process of actually tying healthy food, how to grow it, how to plant it, how to grow it, how to cook it. I would love to see I told you I'm half Italian, so I'd love to see a kitchen in every school where we're actually teaching kids how to prepare food and get back to the old home ec days where we're teaching these really important skill sets. So it starts with some simple things like that. I have a bill that puts a food coordinator in every school, so you can really utilize the exact amount that goes in per kid. It's like $1.12 or $1.17 for a school lunch. But if you put a school coordinator in the schools that can actually not just get food and put it in a microwave and heat it up, that's highly processed, but have someone look at in holistic way at how a school system feeds its kids, that you can start drawing on the local food market and you can do healthier food. And it doesn't cost any more other than that position of having somebody look at it. So I have a bill on that. And then we have the Enrich Act, which teaches, helps medical schools fund nutrition education in our medical schools. Most medical schools don't meet the national standard that they need to meet in order to teach nutrition. Those docs and healthcare professionals should be out in the world as educators to the public. I mean, if we're going to penetrate, change the culture, I was talking with Edge about it earlier, we need rock stars. I mean, not that I'm not a rock star, but you are. We need rock stars, we need athletes, we need musicians, we need people who are out there that can help influence the culture. So there's those things, and including doctors. The last piece is really we have a bill that creates a National Institute for Nutrition.
That's great.
That will actually take the knowledge and figure out how to leverage food as medicine. How do we really understand the microbiome? I mean, when I first learned about gut bacteria, my staff said, don't ever say that in public. You're going to scare the crap out of people. But how do we understand the microbiome? And how do we understand what's going on in our gut and how that relates to mental health issues, depression, cognitive functioning? So just to put a bow on it, we have got to be a competitive country. We're in this brutally global competitive market. We only have 330 million people in the country. So we have all got to be functioning at peak levels. And so to feed our kids 70 grams of sugar in the morning, which some schools do with a chocolate milk and a Rice Krispie treat, you are setting them up for failure. And we pay to subsidize a lot of those foods, and then we pay for the Medicaid that's going to cover them with diabetes. And you wonder why the American taxpayer is like, I'm done with all of you. I'm not voting. I don't want to talk to you. No one knows what they're talking about. You're not addressing the real problems. So the Institute can help us really define and dial in on what the real solutions are.
Yeah, good. It's a great idea.
Can I get your reactions to?
I think it's a great idea, and one of the things that struck us at the Angiogenesis Foundation is that we don't have enough knowledge about the state we call healthy, and what we and Will and the scientists that he's talking to advocate would be a search for biomarkers for health, which are elements in your blood that you can test, and it can give you some indication of your level of disease resistance. And an example would be cholesterol. We get cholesterol levels, which indicates our chances of getting cardiovascular disease in later life. Well, how about if we had another 4 or 5 that would tell us, well, this is your cancer resistance level, this is Alzheimer's resistance level. There's no one looking for those right now, and I think if we put a lot of effort in and we found those, it would be an amazing feedback. Because I think what we're about is empowering people. I think this is the age of personalized medicine on two fronts, people actually taking control of their own health. And if you have the tools to understand your current state and your future state, I think it would give people so much more sense of power and
Yeah.
control.
And Will, you've said to me that we're literally flushing valuable biomarkers. Will you say more about what that means? I
Right.
don't want to.
Well,
Tim, definitely don't talk about this.
Yeah, don't do this one.
Even worse than the microbiome.
well, look, we need to understand more about our health. And, I think that there's been so much of the conversation about what to cut out of our lives, including unhealthy foods. I'd like to flip that conversation around and say, what do we need to lean into that we can embrace? So if we wanted to be informed on what healthy foods to add to our system, it would sure be nice to know if there's something that we could measure, whether it's through a wearable, whether it's through something that's a home monitoring system, whether it's through telemedicine, or whether it's through a blood test in a doctor's office. But the one sort of, I was asked once by an investor, so what's missing today that would change the game? And I said about food and health, and I said, every single day, the toilet flushes away all these markers that we are not measuring. You can imagine, anybody who has a saltwater aquarium knows that there's a floating gauge that actually is measuring everything in the water. And if you Bluetooth that back to a person, you could actually begin to monitor our health at home. So that's just an example of how technology, the science has advanced to help us understand the body in ways coming out of biotechnology.
Right.
We can apply it to nutrition. Technology itself has advanced for us to be able to learn more about ourselves. And I think that's what we all need to be able to connect those dots.
Can I ask you, because this will, if I don't, other people will line up to ask you, what do you eat? What do you
Well,
think it's most important for us to incorporate into our
Right.
diet?
So I will say right now, for disclosure, that I believe that diversity is really important. So I like to eat very diversely. There is no such thing as a single superfood or super diet. There are certain foods that are beneficial, and I write about more than 200 of them in my book, and there are certain dietary patterns that are really healthy. We know the Mediterranean diet pattern is very healthy. We know that there's certain Asian dietary patterns that are healthy. What's really interesting is now thinking about what we should add to our diet. So with my knowledge, I navigate my day sort of in my head, recognizing things on menus. I will reach for green tea. I will have coffee, because we know that coffee actually slows cellular aging.
Perfect. These are good things. Okay.
Right.
Yeah, keep going.
So I think the response I've gotten to my book, Eat to Beat Disease, has been so overwhelmingly positive, because there's no shame, there's no guilt, there's
Yeah.
only science. And science tells us Mother Nature has laced our foods with things that are potentially healthful for us.
Edge, given all that you've learned, how do you go
How
about
do I apply it?
making your choices?
Well,
Yeah.
like Will, green tea's now part of my life, which it wasn't before. Fresh berries every morning. And I suppose lots of cuniferous green vegetables. And then balance, because this is all about balance in the end. And trying to find good quality food. I think this is something that Tim's really right to be concerned about, is that industrial food production has slowly degraded the quality of food. And so finding really good quality food is part of the thing. The tragedy is that in certain parts of the world, it's hard to find.
Yeah.
There are what are called food deserts in America, zones where it's almost impossible to find fresh fruits and vegetables. So there's a lot of, it's not a level playing field for everybody. And that's, I think, part of also what the foundation's interested in, is democratizing health, finding ways that it's accessible to everybody. And with medical insurance becoming so expensive and pharmaceuticals becoming so expensive, prevention is really a much better approach.
Thank you for saying that. And I know that's close to your heart, affordability and accessibility, because too often in these food conversations, we're talking about diets that are really only achievable and affordable for an economic elite. Do you feel like, Will, the guidelines that you lay out in your book are achievable for somebody on a budget?
Right. So there's no diet in my book. It's really a framework and a list of information that helps people make their own best decisions based on their preferences, regardless of their economic status and regardless of their culture as well. Because I think that the wonderful thing about America is that we all come from different cultural backgrounds, and we can all choose from our own value system foods that are actually good for us. The key is really to remove conjecture, remove mythology, remove urban legends, and really, marketeering, which occurs as well about foods, and try to just make that science that's available surfaced, and then really invest in doing more of that work, and it requires collaboration.
Can we talk politics for a second?
Do we have to?
Trust me. But you're not a naive freshman congressman. This is your 8th term, right?
Yeah.
So which of these ideas that have been surfaced already today or other ideas do you think might have the most traction? Where can we reach across the aisle and make some progress?
I think probably some of the smaller ones, but that's where you start in
Right.
politics. You start taking steps in the direction of salad bars in our schools. I think really focusing around our kids and helping understand what we're feeding them in our schools and how to make that environment not just a place of learning around reading, writing, and arithmetic, but also around food and health and being a vibrant, vital member of your family and your society. So I think those are some easy steps that we can take. I actually think there's an opportunity around urban agriculture. I think we have a lot of these older communities that have a lot of blight in them.
Yeah.
So Youngstown, Ohio, which is one of the cities I represent, Akron, Ohio, they went from 160,000 people now down to like 60,000, and so there's a lot of blight in these communities. So having a national initiative where we take the blight down and we build up a robust urban agriculture initiative in the United States, I think is something that is really doable. And it injects healthy food. It tries to take care of the food desert issue, but it's also economically viable. And there's also affordable housing issues too that need to be addressed. But getting healthy food in these communities is something that I would think we can do. The National Institutes of Nutrition is going to end up being a battle because you're going to start pooling agencies from different areas, and that turns into a bloodbath all the time. But I think here's the key around politics, which is why I think Edge and others who are into this stuff is really important. There are a lot of people in the country, millions and millions of people, who get what Doc is saying here. They understand it. They know about it. They know the science behind it. And if they don't, they know it intuitively.
Right.
And those people aren't politically active around a food agenda.
Right.
There is no food agenda in Washington or in the nation. So having a food agenda and using the power of all of these books that you see around veganism and being a vegetarian and paleo and keto and all this stuff, it's millions and millions and millions of people.
Right.
How do we activate them? And is that a Democrat issue, a Republican issue? I have no clue. I mean, I don't know. Is it?
That's always confounded me. I mean, we might disagree on our particular diets, and we certainly are divided by a lot in this country. But the one thing that unites us and all humans on the planet, we all eat. We are all eaters. We are making multiple food choices a day, and it always surprises me that talking about good food then somehow becomes politicized. It seems like it would be a win for a politician. You would reach every voter as an issue that applies to every voter.
I'm thinking of the political shows right now. One side saying this side is for food, and this other side, they're not for food. And vote against them. And
well, on this topic, you have now announced your candidacy for the office of President of the United States and have thrown your hat in the ring for 2020.
Yes, I have.
Can we expect food to be a part of your platform?
It's going to be a major part of the platform. I'm going to give a big policy speech in June, early June, at Tufts University with Dari, who runs their nutrition school there, who's another genius.
Rock star.
Yeah. And we're going to outline moving the discussion from disease care, sick care, to health and food and agriculture. And that's going to be a big part of my agenda. It's going to be an industrial policy in the United States, health and education, and taking care of our vets, and the health and education piece directly tie into food. and saving this money so that we can invest into the future economy and electric vehicle, clearly not part of this discussion, but how do we dominate the electric vehicle market? How do we dominate AI? How do we dominate additive? Where are we going to get the money? And are we going to have a workforce that's vital and ready? Are we going to be creative and innovative and healthy to dominate the world? As I said, we only have 330 million people. We better all be operating at peak performance, and if we're going to make sure we're influencing the world in appropriate ways. So yeah, I mean, I'm excited about talking about it. And since I announced like 3 weeks ago, the support around food, like I go on a normal political show. It's so funny to watch the people interviewing me. They ask me about healthcare, and they want me to get in this big fight about, the disease care system. And I shift and start talking about food. And they're confused at first. And then about a minute in, they're nodding their head. And that's the national conversation I think we need to have. And I think we can really move the needle if we can energize these millions of people.
I'm telling you, we all eat.
We all
I'm
eat.
a political advisor. We all eat. To my knowledge, this would make you, I believe, the first presidential candidate from either major party to ever make a food policy speech while running for office.
That's the plan.
And you mentioned something I think is also important. I think policy and politics is important. Can be a morass sometimes, this field. But having folks like Edge use his platform, I mean, I applaud you for you. There are likely folks in this room who don't know jack about food, but are here because they like your music.
Well,
and
that's okay by me.
You don't have to raise your hands, but you've probably helped shift some minds. How do we activate more people with different platforms outside of nerd world like this to talk about food?
It's an interesting issue, as Tim was saying, and Will, that there's a lot of information out there that's just being lost, and that's part of the problem is quality information. And so the internet is a wonderful resource, but my problem with it is no one's taken out the garbage. It's like so much disinformation. So I think we need to have sources that we really can trust. And that means more research, probably population studies, because it is difficult to do a similar type of, double-blind placebo trial on cabbage. It's difficult. So population studies are very helpful because you might not be able to talk about the individual, but you can talk about the mass trend that a certain lifestyle imparts in terms of health benefits. And I think things like this, spreading the word through these type of events.
I read that if you hadn't decided to pursue this little band with your high school buddies, you would have become a doctor. Is that true?
I have no idea. It's one of those imponderable questions, but I certainly have found myself very interested and fascinated by this world. And it's a wonderful thing. I mean, there's so much that's going right. I think it'd be wrong to paint a bleak picture about medical science because, we need pharmaceuticals, and the NIH is doing incredible work, not just for America, but for the globe in developing new drugs. I suppose what we're advocating is completing the picture. We feel like there's this part of the house that has not been decorated. It's like it's been left idle, and the food has the potential to really move the needle.
And I'm glad you raised that because I think there's an important clarifying point that we need to make. Critics of just even the term food as medicine have said it's unsettled science. It's a dangerous idea to mislead people into believing that food can cure a disease. You are not saying food in lieu of pharmaceuticals.
No, no, I'm not one of these physicians that have left my own playing field to do woo-woo science or products. I don't sell supplements or anything like that. I can tell you that I think we're at a inflection point where the investment in life sciences that has been in both the public and private sectors, and the NIH is a great kind of crucible for the basic sciences that allowed us to develop all these really tremendous treatments, like immune therapies for cancer are wiping out cancers in patients with metastatic disease, things that we didn't think possible. I think we're at this inflection point where we can take the fruits of some of that knowledge and begin bringing in the right type of focus to be able to examine our food. And so I don't think food is a replacement for medicine by any means. I think food is actually a tool in the toolbox that's long been missing. And that's really, I think, the opportunity that everybody can rally behind, because everybody understands when you're sick. I mean, another reason I got into this is because when I was taking care of patients at the VA hospital, something struck me that these men who were often overweight, had terrible lung disease and other chronic diseases. I realized that when they were in their 20s, they were the cut, buff defenders of our country. They couldn't even serve unless they were perfectly fit. And now I see them in a completely different state. And it made me ask the question, what happened? And when they would actually put their coats on and leave my medical office, they'd always turn around and ask me, hey, doc, what should I do for myself? And I realized as I was never educated about that in med school or in training. And hence, what Congressman Ryan is talking about, and Edge mentioned, is that the need to be able to develop trust within our system of good information that doctors, the medical community, can rally behind. And I think that will then really start to move the needle for this country.
Yeah. And I want you, Edge, to have an opportunity to clarify too. You, same position. You're not advocating food in lieu of pharmaceuticals. Food is an additional tool in the toolkit.
That's the great thing about it. It's an additional tool. It's not in competition with conventional protocols of treatment. It's an addition to those. But as a preventative, that's a different thing altogether.
Yes.
And it's a very powerful disease prevention tool.
And I'm doing this because there will be somebody who will quote this out of context, and I want to make sure you're
not
clear.
my business.
Not in your business, I'm sure.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's the preventative piece. I mean, it's funny because I'm on the side of you and I'm watching this conversation. No, it's fine. It's just interesting because I'm like in the catbird seat and I'm sitting there. We're talking about teaching doctors about nutrition, and like that's like a big thing. Like doctors don't know about nutrition and they don't talk to their patients about nutrition. It's like how bizarre that sounds when you're over here listening to the conversation, but they don't. So we have to do something about it. And I think that pause right now is what we need.
Yeah.
Like there's people writing probably bogus, analyses of what we're talking about here. And wait a minute. Food, they're trying to diminish the impact of food, healthy food on our bodies. It's like, how did we survive 69,000 years without, pharmaceutical companies? I mean, it was our food, and that's how we got here. And so we know that. And it's just like when you stop and you pause, which is why, we collectively have to shift the conversation, because once you shift the conversation, I think this whole thing is about asking other questions. So you say, how do we fix healthcare as opposed to how do we get healthy? If we ask the question, how do we get healthy, it totally shifts the paradigm of the conversation. And then if you add Edge and you look at like Tom Brady and LeBron James and high-performing peak athletes and what they eat, like those people can influence the culture of what to eat. And so this has got to be an American family conversation that, like my great-grandparents came to America from Italy. And I was fortunate because I grew up, I would go to family parties and people would have, talking broken English. I mean, that was my family. But they had huge gardens. They had a chicken coop out back, and I remember asking my grandma, who killed the chicken? She was like, I did. And it made the best chicken soup, she would say. And so like that, we've lost that in the last however many years, that generational information that gets passed along about how to eat and some of the stuff, turmeric and garlic and all these things. Like, it's sad. It really is, because that's such a beautiful way to live. And I think when you look at like the blue zones and these communities, it's not just about the food, it's about the connection. It's about gardening. It's about having your own plot of land to grow your own food. It's about sitting after you cook it. You cook the food, and then you eat the food, and then you have a little glass of wine with your family, and it's that connection that comes with food. And so it's bigger than just the prevention. It's a cultural thing that we have to get back, and that's why I think the urban Marshall Plan that we're going to be proposing with a lot of urban ag initiatives in it is more about just food. It's about building communities again, and we're really disconnected today. We think we're more connected because of these monsters that we carry around with us, but the reality of it is we're not, and food can really be an item that can help connect us too.
Yeah, I
True.
agree. On that, I'm going to connect us to the audience and see if there are folks who would like to ask a question, if you don't mind. The mic is coming around.
Talk to us about the power of big ag that sells sugar and a lot of things that aren't helpful, and do you think you can get over that in Congress?
Big ag. So there's a huge consolidation in agriculture right now. I mean, it looks, smells, and feels a lot like monopolistic behavior around seed and around chemicals that go onto the land, and the soil is depleting. As I said, there's 220,000 metric tons of fish that get killed every year in the Gulf of Mexico. I mean, just take that in for a second. Real good sources of protein gone because of how we're doing this. And so in order to break big ag in that sense, and I've had some constructive conversations this week with some people who are active in big agriculture who are starting to try to turn the ship. So how do we approach this in a constructive way? By bringing people together. But it's going to take a lot of pressure from those millions of people I was talking about to build a political movement around food to have enough political power. So, farmers haven't made a profit in 5 years. And rural America is in recession. And you add in the tariff issue, and it's made it even worse. The downtowns are tough. There's a meth epidemic in Iowa. There's an opiate epidemic in Ohio and other states. So our society is ripping apart. And so bringing more regional, sustainable ag creates jobs in rural America. It's healthier food. I think it protects the farmer at the end of the day from the whims of the global commodities market. So there could be a win-win-win here. And so coming in with an agenda to reduce the monopolistic power, shift the industry, is only going to happen if there's outside pressure from a political movement built around what we are talking about here. That's the key. That's why I say, people, I know you're getting, I understand how people feel about Washington, D.C. And talking about flushing things down the toilet, I pictured in D.C. it'd be like red alert, we're getting overrun with material here. And people have got to get involved. It's an absolute necessity today for people who understand what Doc has been talking about, what Edge is talking about. You cannot sit on the sidelines. You've got to be involved to help shift this system in the right direction, or we're going to belly up our healthcare system and our economy. Yep. And you're going to sit on the sidelines and say, well, those people were all, I didn't want to do it. I didn't want to take that first step.
Do we have another question? We've got a mic right back here. Yep.
Thanks for all you're doing. I'm Canadian, but just curious, when Michael Bloomberg imposed the soda tax years ago, he got a lot of heat for that. Can you guys comment, all three of you, on just sort of people behaving according to incentives, like taxing soda and that kind of thing? And specifically for Tim, I mean, salad bars in schools is obviously an incredible concept, but how feasible is that if there's a soda vending machine in those schools? So can you talk about kind of trying to remove sugar and bad choices from the cafeteria in school?
Yeah, no question. Well, it's got to be everything. Again, feeding our kids chocolate milk, sodas. I mean, you look at a chocolate milk, it has almost as much sugar in it as a Coke or Pepsi. So, that's definitely got to shift. I think this needs to be a comprehensive strategy. So when you get into, are you going to tax sugar? Are you going to tax this? Are you going to tax that? For what? I think we got especially Democrats, we're going to tax this, tax that, which, I'm for some of that. For what? So what's the reforms that are going to come in place that we're going to actually put the money in, and what are we going to do with it? So you're making an argument to everybody, like, here's why, here's the reform. And I've also seen studies, I can't remember the country in South America that did all kinds of food reform. Was it Brazil? Was it Brazil? They said that what had more impact than even a sugar tax was limiting the marketing of these products to kids. I don't know if it was just kids or the whole society, from like 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. And they took like Tony the Tiger and the Fruit Loops and all that, and you couldn't use cartoon characters anymore to market food. And the study was saying that actually had more of an impact on reducing consumption of these products than a sugar tax did.
Right.
So now you're trying to talk about a politically viable way forward,
Yep.
right? Okay, sugar tax, we saw Bloomberg, certain networks came and blew it up, or we're going to limit marketing. That may have more political legs than the other.
And possibly incentivizing producers of quality foods that actually have a health benefit, making that it possible for them to make that known and put on the label of the food. I think if it's more profitable, people are going to drift in that direction.
I think that's a really important point too. I know Ray Dalio was here earlier, and if you've not read his analysis of the real national emergency around income inequality, you should. But he talked about this double bottom line or triple bottom line, and to have a double bottom line where it's not like you have a corporate tax rate, for example, that's X for just straight bottom line profit, and you can do whatever you want, or you get a lower rate if you have more in line with stakeholders than just shareholders. And the stakeholders would be the environment, companies that are moving into the healthy food direction, shifting these kind of practices away from highly added sugar. I mean, that's just one example of like how you use the free market to really ramp this stuff up, because it'll take government forever to do anything. So if you get the free market aligned and you get those incentives lined up and you use some tax code incentives, this could take off, and why wouldn't we want to reward those companies?
Yeah.
Well, and I also think that entrepreneurship will actually drive the opportunity to take this desire to have healthier food to create new opportunities. And so, at this meeting, we've already heard from some of these small startups that have some brilliant ideas.
Yeah.
I think they just need to work within an ecosystem that's going to encourage them to thrive.
Right.
And we need more of them because competition is good.
Yeah.
Right. Right here?
Hello? Yeah, so a quick comment for Edge and then a question for Tim. On the subject
I like
of
how the rock star gets the comment, gets the question.
No, subject, you mentioned biomarkers. There's a company you should look at called Color Genomics. That
I know
Lorraine
of
Powell
Color
Jobs-
Genomics.
Yeah, I'm a backer of that with Steve Jobs' wife. And question for Tim. How do we support you other than campaign donations? Are there programs that you're driving or connected to that we could fund or otherwise get involved with to try to spread the message?
Yeah. So we're building the campaign site out on timryanforamerica.com, so you can find out about that piece. And then the legislation that we're putting together, we're actually going to sit down in like my official capacity with Dari from Tufts, with Doc and Edge. Of course, you're welcome to be a part of it. Building out the coalition around the National Institute for Nutrition. So how do we get private sector, venture capital, public health, education, and we build out the movement to really influence this. And let's talk after, because I'll get connected. But just help in that way, because that's how we're going to end up moving the needle. But on all these pieces of legislation too, what I'd like to do is build out this movement so that all of you can go home and email or text or call your representative to say, hey, get on Tim Ryan's bill to put more nutrition into the medical schools, or more salad bars, or whatever, National Institutes of Nutrition, whatever. So we'll connect. But I appreciate you asking, because we need to build this out.
And I don't think I shared with you, but I, as an advisor to the Milken Institute on issues related to food, nutrition, and sustainability, we are prepared and have discussed in the last 48 hours how we're going to help move along the National Institute of Nutrition.
So call her.
And a few other of these ideas. Who has the mic?
Thank you. First of all, thank you all. very interesting. Yesterday there was a panel here that was on food, but a little different. So everyone's solutions here, I think, have the aim of getting us back to the way we used to eat in one way or another. In yesterday's panel, the CFO of Impossible Foods was here talking about a totally different approach, which was using technology to take us forward, to make food different in a way that he argues has good health benefits as well. I'm curious if you all have a view on sort of technology-driven solutions that are, different from where we are evolutionarily.
I think it's got to be part of the whole strategy of dealing with the problem. Clearly, the global resources are overtaxed at the moment. You're talking about the depletion of soil and even the need for industrial production of food. So innovations in food production that are less taxing on the environment are obviously hugely important.
And I would comment on this idea about food innovation through technology. The key to that is to build trust with the people who actually the products would be consumed by. And so I think that's not simply a technology solution, that's also having credibility behind the actual solution. One group is not going to be able to do it by themselves, but I think en masse will actually be able to get people to develop a higher level of trust, which is to some extent why we need our leaders of the nation to be able to rally around this common cause. We need it from the top down, but also from the bottom up, all to participate in this movement.
And I think the growth, just quickly, the growth needs to go to the communities that have been left behind. So we were at the conference on Saturday, where we were talking about it, and someone was talking about growing the cells for meat.
Yeah.
Is it UMA?
Mm-hmm.
UMA.
Memphis Meats.
Memphis Meats. So they literally taken the cells for beef and growing in beef. And Walter Robb leaned over to me from Whole Foods, and he said, how do you think people in Ohio feel about that? I said, I'm not sure they're there yet. And I said, but if you put the facility that's going to make that product in Youngstown or in the old meat packing areas in Milwaukee or areas that have been left behind, all of a sudden you're shifting the culture. That's what I'm saying. We just got to be smart about how we do this, and the double bottom line and the government can help steer some of that. And then all of a sudden you're finding more and more ways to shift the culture in this direction.
With our last few minutes, can we this is an interesting room and an interesting conference in that it's not a preaching to the choir type audience, which many of us are people from all political sides, different nations, different sectors. So if you could put out one call to action, what's the one thing you would ask folks to do when they leave this room?
Get engaged, vote, social media, organize wherever you are. Around your kid's school, your community, just start where you are. You don't have to change the world.
Right.
Just change where you are and be involved. And you all are here, so you all have a lot of influence in whatever community you're in. You're probably really well connected. You probably have more money than most, and you probably know people who have money. How do you shift the diet in the school that your kids go to or in the community that you live? If you just do that and everybody leaves this room and goes home and does that, then we're off and running.
Will?
I would say look for evidence, because you want to be able to trust the information that you're going to use to put food in your mouth and in your family's mouths every single day. And that's one of the things that I write about in my book is more than 200 foods. Look for the ones that you actually enjoy, prefer, because then if you actually use that as your start for healthy eating, you're already ahead of the game. And so again, we should be leaning into our diets and thinking about what we should add to our lives, not simply what we should take away, and be skeptical about claims that are, sort of superfoods, because there really isn't anything. We have to go back to our nature, back to our roots, and really sort of rediscover the things that we've always intuitively known.
Mm-hmm.
Edge?
Well, I think it's about educating yourself. There is the information out there. Good quality information. It's not easy to find sometimes, but the Angiogenesis Foundation is a great source, for instance, on their website. And then, every time you go to the supermarket, you're making a set of choices, and once you're empowered with that information, I think you're going to be in a better position to buy the things that are going to keep you healthy. And I suppose spread the word. spread the word to your friends
Yeah.
what those things are.
Yep. You know, I was curious about how you got the nickname Edge, and I was told that your bandmates gave it to you because of your sharp mind. And I'm not going to ask you if that's true, because I know you're too humble to say if it is. But I'll just say you have proven that to be the case here today.
Well, thank you
So
much.
thank you, and thank you, everybody, for listening.
Thank you.
Thank you. Great.
Thanks, Tim.
Thank you for attending. Please make your way to the next session.